Good day, folks, and welcome back to the channel. The topics for today are some economy updates, and the main topic, moving for a job is a scam in this day and age. This is going to be a doozy. The video footage you are seeing is historic Columbus, Georgia. This neighborhood is adjacent to the Chattanooga River that runs alongside downtown Columbus, Georgia. To my surprise, this neighborhood actually has low-density apartments, which you will see in the video. As an urban planner and civil engineer, I am used to seeing NIMBYism, not in my backyard-ism, and fighting against this. This is a quaint neighborhood that on this Sunday that I shot the footage was just waking up at 7:30 in the morning and mostly taking their dogs for walks. At the end of this video, you will see the neighborhood park and fountain. That'll be back behind to the right as you've seen before. Now on to the market updates. The biggest news is Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world is leaving the petrodollar. So basically, no longer does the rest of the world need to exchange their currency for US dollars in order to buy oil. So as you all know, the oil goes up in the summertime, the oil prices, because the Middle East is taking advantage of the fact that a lot of people like to drive during the summer, and the USA is one of the Western nations especially that has to deal with higher oil prices. And in my last video, I mentioned that Joe Biden earlier this summer released a lot of oil that the U.S. has in reserves. That oil is the oil we get from our own country that we pump from our own ground. And they released that in order to help ease the gas prices. And I think it's worked a little bit. So this currency is, this is a huge thing. It's huge like BRICS. If you're familiar with the new monetary alliance between Middle East, Africa, South America, and other nations, this is an attempt to boost up their own currency. So since these countries no longer have to exchange their money into US dollars and prop up the American dollar, which they've been doing for the last 50 years, upon agreement with the United States of America, the USA is going to see more inflation and less US money exchange around the world. This means the dollar will fall because around the world, countries are opting to use their own currency to bolster their own nations financially. And that makes sense because a lot of nations are trying to improve their middle class and get their people out of poverty. A lot of nations have more poverty than the United States of America, and that's relative poverty, because we can get into a whole other video on that, because poverty is different across the world. This means you and I have to work harder because the American government and corporations are going to pass the financial losses of this on to us, the American worker. We will have to foot the bill. Now, due to this and the job market hanging on by a thread with unemployment up to 4%, the Fed will not be cutting rates, but maybe once, and in my opinion, not until right before the election to prop up the election, and definitely not before then. The Fed claims they don't want to interfere with the economy, but then they keep talking out of both sides of their mouths because they can't figure out if they should cut rates, because the economy will suffer if they cut the rates. But then, of course, that's the job market, and that's also people's savings rates. If you have high savings rate, you're probably making somewhere around 5% right now, which is among historically high rates for return on the money in the savings accounts. But also they want to say that they don't want to cut rates because it'll hurt the economy, but then they say they need to cut rates because they insist that they cut them. It all depends on the date over the next few months, and they want to cut them because they think they're historically too high. So basically they're scrambling. They're looking for more data in the future, and in my opinion, like I said in the last video, they're going to cut rates before the election because it will help both candidates, because it'll be proof that something is happening in the markets to both candidates. So now we can move along to the stock market itself, which has still been performing very strongly, even to my amazement. Nvidia itself, if you remember with Nvidia chips, they're up over 1,000%. These PC chips are essential to artificial intelligence and the advancement of new technology. They're not just using your phones anymore, they're essential for artificial intelligence. The USA used to make them, but then ridiculously got rid of its manufacturing sector, which led to us becoming a mainly service sector economy, and of course the degradation of the middle class. If you're familiar with the old adage people used to say back in the 80s and in the 70s, the ending of this was probably the 90s, I'll make a video on that. They used to be able to afford a house, a car, and a stay-at-home parent living off of the wages of a factory job. That's no longer possible because, of course, factory jobs today in this age don't pay that much. And on top of that, they mostly are unionized, but they still can't get the bargaining power they need to afford people higher wages and better quality of life. Now Biden is fueling a huge USA race against Asia to start making these factories again and making these especially PC chips like Nvidia needs. China hates this and is hoping its massive population and cheap labor can beat the USA. Taiwan also has a comparative advantage in chip manufacturing as well. China and Taiwan have a slight edge over the USA, but of course the USA has robots and other technology to make the assembly line uniform and controlled, which in the long run will beat human-powered assembly lines. Hopefully, most of our assembly lines will feature human beings for now and into the short-term future, providing new jobs and stability. As I mentioned, he'd be a good bolster for not necessarily the middle class in this day and age, but at least the working class. If you're familiar with everybody trying to talk about the trades and not going to college anymore, there needs to be an alternative for people to do in order to bring in income and to go to work. So this would be a good alternative to that, and hopefully it would help people bolster up their finances. One of the greatest stories in the stock market that I actually jive with is GameStop and what is happening with retail investors. If you're not familiar with the GameStop fad, there is an entire HBO documentary on it, and it's actually quite good. I highly recommend it to understand how the average person, which is called the retail investor, got a handle on the market and made Wall Street cry tears of unfairness. It's ridiculous. YouTube personality Rory and Kitty used his fan base to start an assault on the market, getting his followers to buy up GameStop stock and send it soaring. Well, he did it again this year, and folks are making life-changing money again, like retirement money off of their personal savings. Personally, I say more power to them because long gone are the days of pensions, which were axed in the 1990s in favor of IRAs. There'll be another video on the sordid history of this and how the airline industry got rid of all of its pensions in favor of saving money and putting all of its people off of the pension and into the stock market. Wall Street is doing its darndest to get Washington to regulate retail investors so that we can't quote unquote manipulate the market. I find this hilarious because that is all Wall Street and Washington do. They manipulate the markets. If you're just now finding out about GameStop and what's happening with the market, it may be too late, as the adage is buy the rumor, sell the news, and this is all over the news right now. It's certainly great news. But if you get into the stock market and Reddit forums like Wall Street Bets, which I am a member of, you may be able to make some life-changing money in the stock market. I say this on top of course, the most fiscally responsible method of buying index funds and dollar cost averaging. And dollar cost averaging just means making regular monthly index fund purchases to your account. Of course, in order to make regular index fund purchases to your account, you need to have a steady job, which is very hard to come by these days with all these layoffs. So speaking of steady jobs and the lack thereof, what is the new treadmill right now? Well, one wrong move and your job is gone and you're homeless, and meanwhile you're stuck working for crappy management and no wage increases, barely affording your mortgage apartment, living paycheck to paycheck. That's the treadmill. And in 2023, 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So what is this cycle of boom and bust that's supposedly happening? It's more so like greed by corporations and laying people off when they want to make more money and increase their stocks for shareholders. According to Bloomberg, 87% of all Americans can come up with $500 for an emergency. But my question is that savings or credit cards? Because according to CNBC, 50% of all Americans in 2023 had less than $500 in their savings account. Now, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York says credit card debt is still near its all-time high of $1.29 trillion. Right now, it's at $1.115 trillion for the first quarter of this year, 2024. This is not a path to creating as much a financially safe and secure life as we can. In fact, a six-figure job is not as important as a paid-off house. Now bear with me. You can get fired over anything a manager or corporate wants to fire you over, since the Republicans and Democrats made so many states right to work. This right to work classification means that even if you belong to a union, your union cannot negotiate your wages as high as they used to be able to, and not even as effectively as they used to be able to. Therefore, right-to-work states guarantee lower wages in their states. Moreover, right-to-work states typically have laws that favor the employer over the employee in work disputes. Each state is different, so definitely look up the laws for each state, or do like I did and pay a lawyer $150 for an hour of his time for him to explain the work environment and labor department practices to you for your individual state. This is all in keeping with paying the least amount for your labor. Another trend is firing engineers across tech and other industries and outsourcing this work to cheap labor in poorer countries like Poland, India, and other countries. This has been a thing since the 1990s when the U.S. outsourced call centers and customer service centers jobs to India and other countries to take advantage of cheap labor there. This is a big fad back in the 1990s, as this is when Generation X actually started getting upset. Google just laid off another 200 people and are hiring for those roles in India and Mexico, which is a modern example of the same thing. I'll make another video on the outsourcing topic. This channel is not apolitical. In fact, both parties are garbage, and Trump and Biden are two sides of the same coin: old, delusional, and played out. Both parties snowball the effects of each party's enacted policies to their advantage and actually work together to seesaw power perpetually to our detriment. This is why there will never be other political parties of stature in the United States of America. You just won't have it. The Green Party fizzled out, and I highly doubt Kennedy is going to get many votes. So here's my point for today. A six-figure job is not as important as a paid-off house. Why? Because moving is a scam, and moving for that six-figure job is a scam. Why? The rental market is a scam. You need first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit for each place. In some major cities like New York and cities across California, you need to have a broker's fee and other finder's fees on top of all the fees I just stated. If you were to get fired or laid off, then you need that again and again and again for each new job you get, and it's even worse if the job is across the country or in other parts of the country that you're not familiar with, where you have to move into another or new apartment. Plus the fee to break your lease, which can vary from $2,000 to $5,000. If you can't pay the fee, then it goes on your credit report. There goes your credit score. Now you can't rent from corporations. Now you have to have sketchy landlords, if you can even get those apartments with sketchy landlords. And this is not far-fetched. I read a story about one woman who in the past 3 years, each year she got laid off. Every year she was laid off, and every year she had to find a new job, and every year she had to go off of her savings. This is ridiculous. I understand that each person in each family needs to have savings, but if you perpetually on a treadmill of boom and bust, supposedly, which actually only affects you, your own boom and bust of having money or not having money, because you either have a job or you don't have a job, then you cannot keep your money in your savings account. You have to constantly use your emergency savings, and you're constantly building it back up. This is why I advocate doing what many cultures around the world do. Live with family and save your money. If you don't have good family, get good friends or roommates. Save your money. If your plan is to strike it big and make six figures in Silicon Valley, awesome. Save around $20,000 to afford to get fired and stack your money, living off as little as possible, that you can still be very happy while you're working. Save your money. Those salaries can be $200,000 and higher. If they are, live off half of that salary. I don't work in those fields making that high a salary, but if I did, I'd live off half of it for 5 to 10 years and then quit and set up my life. You could buy a good house in a medium-sized city with your savings and start your own business, or work a small remote job or in-person job with less stress. There are methods to the madness. In fact, in Columbus, you can find houses that are of good quality for $100,000. That's a stretch, but usually around $150,000. You can have them totally remodeled for even $100,000. I watched the market all this spring. There are out there. Unfortunately, the times we're in likely won't change anytime soon. So you have to use your brain, and you have to hack the system. And when I say hack the system, I'm not saying take advantage of it negatively, unethically, or even illegally. I'm saying you have to put some thought into what you do nowadays. You can't just take everybody's advice and expect it to work out for you. You can't do what the average person does, and you can't do what society tells you to do. You have to think about it for yourself and do what makes you happy. Well, that's it for the video for today, folks. My goal is to have at least 2 videos per week. This will be updated on Saturday, June 15th, and the next video will hopefully come out on the Wednesday following that. I will also be out of town, so we'll have some new video footage not in Columbus. And you can guess where I'm going to be, but I'll update it on the thumbnail of the video. All right, folks, enjoy your weekend, and make sure you make time to take care of yourself. See you on the next video.